Lessons from the past for Southern Ontario. Hurricane Hazel, October 1954. In 1954, a major hurricane from the Caribbean traveled up to the United States, across Lake Ontario, into the Toronto region. Once it hit the Toronto region, it was stalled by a cold front, where it rained intensely. 285 millimeters of rain fell within 48 hours onto ground that was already saturated due to the fall rains. The ground could not take in the extra moisture. Infrastructure was heavily damaged, including the loss of 50 bridges. In today's dollars, this damage would have been $1.1 billion. 4,000 people were left homeless, 81 people died, including the firefighters trying to rescue people from the Humber River. Raymond Drive was a community built on the Humber River floodplain. This is where 35 people actually died when their homes washed away. Lessons learned. After Hurricane Hazel, the Conservation Authorities of Ontario were created to make sure that nothing like that happened again. Conservation authorities are in charge of monitoring flood levels. They're also in charge of making sure that people do not build on floodplains like they did on Raymond Drive along the Humber River. 41 years later, climate change is teaching us a new lesson in Southern Ontario. That means intense rain. August 19, 2005 was an example of this. In Toronto, 150 millimeters of rain fell within 3 hours. 1,000 people were left without power and 1,000 basements were flooded. This intense climate change rainstorm cost the province $5 million in insurable damages, province's most expensive. This bridge itself was $6 million and it took several months to be able to repair. A couple of years later, another climate change storm hit on July 8, 2013. This time, 126 millimeters of rain fell within 6 hours, about 2 months' worth, with a huge intensity of 704 millimeters per hour over a large area of Toronto, unlike the one in 2005. These are a couple of photos from this storm, including the bus completely flooded by water, the highways being blocked, this transit train that was basically submerged underwater and people had to be rescued off the train. Subways were submerged by water. Cars had to be abandoned in underpasses, and the most famous photo, of course, was this Ferrari that was abandoned by a lawyer. The next climate change rainstorm occurred in Burlington, a city 1 hour west of Toronto. In August of 2014, 200 millimeters of rain fell within 3 hours. Most of this rain was picked up from Lake Ontario and dumped within a small area of the city. The creeks in the city were completely overwhelmed with water and flooded over its banks. Most of the creeks affected were in the West End, including Tuck, Shoreacres, Appleby, and Sheldon. The creeks brought rainwater from the north down to the south, flooding the southern area of the city, including highways such as the 407, the QEW, which is a major highway cutting through southern Ontario, and I believe my van is the one at the top left where I was actually crossing at this time. Basements were flooded all over the city, and about 500 basements were severely damaged, including the Mayor of Burlington's basement. And the funniest photo from this, of course, are the people that are canoeing on the streets of Burlington. In total, this storm cost about $90 million of insurable damages. How can we mitigate climate change in Southern Ontario? Well, it first starts with storm drains and hard surfaces. Most cities have lots of hard surfaces which channel the water into storm sewers, which then dump their large volumes of water into creeks, and also ends up causing a lot of erosion along the shorelines. An example of this erosion would be here. This is Humber River flowing into Lake Ontario. How can we change the intense water? Well, we make sure that there's more areas where water can permeate into the ground, including green driveways. We can also make sure that storm drains don't drain directly into creeks. We can make sure that we're using storm retention ponds in a lot of our new development areas. And we can also make sure that our creeks are being naturalized and not channeled so that water flows quickly. We can rethink our 100-year floodplain boundaries to be able to match the new climate change situations and not build on floodplains like this high school in Burlington. We can also make sure that we listen to our conservation authorities and not build on the floodplains. Like many other areas around the world, southern Ontario is already facing climate change issues in the forms of heavy, intense rain. Hopefully, we can make changes to mitigate the impact of these storms.